Political leaders in Britain promised to work together to try to find shelter from the storm. But can politicians anywhere do enough to stave off the consequences of panic? Tonight, the Western financial system hasn't gone over the edge of the cliff. Well, not yet anyway. It's rather held its breath today. Here in Britain, party leaders said they'd work together.
We have a Prime Minister who's running the country, and at a difficult time, I think it's right for opposition parties to try and work together with the government.
They're desperate to avoid the example of America, where George Bush is still begging politicians to agree something, anything, which might still the panic.
If our nation continues on this course, the economic damage will be painful and lasting.
Almost the whole political establishment is behind him, so why didn't Congress agree? Is the really big question here whether this implosion of capitalism signals the end of what was once called the American century. Good evening. It was a day when everyone was pretty much still reeling from Washington's inability last night to agree to a plan the President said was vital if the United States is to avoid economic calamity. In Britain, politicians of all the big parties agreed to work together to make sure the same thing doesn't happen here. The markets, though, weren't entirely persuaded, with shares in big banks coming under pressure, which led to calls for the British government to follow the Irish in guaranteeing savers' deposits. Here's Paul Mason.
Today, the stock markets recovered, but risks haunting the banking system prompted a flurry of action. Mervyn King's 7 a.m. call on Gordon Brown signalled that those in charge of the financial system are bracing for further shocks. And when Alistair Darling called his Conservative, Lib Dem and SNP opposite numbers in, the prospect of a cross-party solution took shape. But what's the problem? The problem is the UK banking sector. The nationalisation of Bradford and Bingley with no queues and no mudslinging raised two tantalising questions. One, if the government is going to stand behind all savers to any amount, should it come out and say so? Two, since the nationalisation worked so well, could it be done, even now, at least partially, with HBOS? All afternoon, the HBOS share price moved on the rumour that Lloyds TSB was about to renegotiate the rescue agreed 2 weeks ago. Lloyds ended the day up 4%. HBOS plunged 14%. And then the government raised the amount of your money protected in any bank to £50,000.
We have got to get what is right and also what is reasonable. And of course we look at every intervention that is necessary to take, but I think people can see from our actions so far that depositors have been protected. No UK depositor has actually lost money. And when I say that we will take action to do whatever is necessary and however it is necessary, I think people know that we have acted and will continue to act when it is the right thing to do.
There are serious questions to be asked about how we got into the situation we're in, how we allowed ourselves to face the kind of problems that we face. But today is not the moment to be asking those questions. People are extremely anxious about their savings, their mortgages, their jobs. And what I made clear to Alistair Darling, and he very much agreed with me, that now is a moment for the parties to be working together constructively. We don't want an American-style party wrangling and the kind of bitter division that we've seen over on the other side of the Atlantic.
But the UK's banks are far from out of the woodwork. Look at this composite graph of their value since Northern Rock. The big slide in the middle is a result of the mini credit crunch that happened after Bear Stearns collapsed. Here's the Lehman collapse, and then the Washington deal falls apart there at the end. Now, banking regulations mean that when a bank's share price falls, it has to either raise more capital or reduce the amount of risk it's exposed to. But much of the UK banking system can't do either.
The government, frankly, all of us, can't afford to see it fail. If Lloyd's shareholders vote it down, walk away, back off, it's the end of HBOS. We risk seeing lines in the street again. Nobody wants to have that happen, and that would destroy confidence in the UK as a whole, and it's a bad problem. So it has to happen. And if Lloyd's needs to recut the deal or wants to recut the deal, more than likely the government is going to have to pitch in.
The Republic of Ireland today went for the zero option, a wholesale bailout of its banking system. It guaranteed 400 billion euros worth of banking assets, not just deposits, but bonds and other debts, twice the value of the Irish economy. So could it happen here? Today, Alistair Darling has been locked in with the Governor of the Bank of England and bank bosses. Nothing is not on the table, I am told. There is scepticism about the Irish solution, but experts believe the option for public sector bodies to invest in the stricken banks in return for a stake is not only possible, but likely.
In a banking crisis or a bank problem that's very material, unfortunately, there's only two choices. You can either get the equity capital from the market, or you can get it from the government.
Would that get a bipartisan response? It may not need to. The government said tonight that it can do everything it needs to under existing laws.
Well, Paul is with us in the studio now, and joining us from the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham is our political editor, Michael Crick. First of all, Paul, is it really conceivable, as one of your experts suggested there, that the government could take a stake in a bank that isn't bust?
Well, this, amid all the chaos, is what happened yesterday when the US government facilitated the bailout of Wachovia. Citigroup merges with it. The government guarantees billions of dollars worth, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of loans, and it takes 12 billion in shares. Now, there is no indication here that the government is going to do this, but these meetings today have to have been about something, because the 50k aspect, which we'll talk about in a minute, has been sorted out. Now, I've been looking through the legislation which was used to nationalise Northern Rock, and it's very clear that the options in it are neither for just total nationalisation, nor is it only the government who can take on board a failing bank or part of a failing bank. There's the Bank of England, a nominee of the Treasury, a company wholly owned by the Bank of England or Treasury, or any body corporate not within that paragraph. So there's all kinds of options, and the discussions I've had today lead me to believe they're looking at private options and maybe public options, but it'll be bank by bank rather than this huge thing that the Americans are trying and failing to achieve.
When you said in your piece, public sector bodies, I think you said, taking a stake in banks, that's what it's no more precise than that.
No, look, I think the expert you heard in my report there points out there's only two places that the new money to recapitalise the banking system can come from. And I'm sure that the government is working hard to try and vector private sector funds into the sector. Okay. But if it can't, it has to be, logic predicts this, that they have to be discussing in number 11 some form of state involvement.
OK, now the question of how people know that their savings or deposits are safe, the Irish government's guaranteed up to 50,000, totally, haven't they? Yeah. And the British have put it up to 50,000.
50,000, yeah. Now, I mean, today's been about dotting the I's and crossing the T's on that. The government is right. It could do it anyway. It didn't need a bipartisan initiative to do it, and it's done it. I think that, actually, Adair Turner said to you last night on this programme, not a single depositor has lost a penny in any of the bank busts that we've seen already. Implicitly, there is still, and I think it's something that some bank analysts expect to be made more explicitly, there is implicitly a guarantee of a bit more than 50k. Certainly, B&B had about a third of its depositors were holding on to more than 50k inside Bradford and Bingley, and they haven't lost out.
Paul, thanks very much. Well, Michael Crick is, as I say, at the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. Michael, how have the Tories been reacting up there?
Well, today the whole tone and direction of this conference changed radically. David Cameron this morning, 11 o'clock, came out with a 15-minute emergency statement offering that cross-party cooperation and saying that the wrangling that went on in Washington last night must not be allowed to happen here. And hence the trip by George Osborne to the Treasury this afternoon. Shadow ministers have been ordered today to rewrite their speeches, to cut out the knockabout stuff, cut out the anti-Labour jokes, and the whole tone here has changed. Even the cardboard cutouts of David Miliband and those bananas have suddenly vanished.
How far are they prepared to go with this cooperation?
Well, they're talking at the moment about cooperation in Parliament on legislation to deal with banking reform. That the idea is that the Conservatives would get advance sight of that legislation, would be given the opportunity to raise any reservations they have. Now, I think that cooperation would come under strain if the government was to go ahead with the kind of measures that Paul Mason was talking about there, taking a significant stake in ailing banks. I think that when David Cameron here today talked about the wrangling in Washington, he was also aware of the fact there was a serious split last night in the Republican Party, and there will be people in the Conservative Party who would be very upset about their party cooperating with anything that smacked of old-style socialism.
Michael, thank you very much. We're all in this together was the Conservative Party leader's line when he spoke to his conference today. He declared something of an armistice on the issue, saying his party would suspend hostilities and help the government get legislation passed, making it possible to rescue banks. We don't want a repeat of the American experience, he said. The Liberal Democrats are also offering to help. The cataclysm in capitalism made Mr Cameron speak out, and when he'd finished doing so, Emily Maitlis talked to him.
You've put party political difference aside. Do you have full confidence in the government to see us through this, then?
Well, what I said in the speech is that, of course, we still have a job to do in terms of pointing out the mistakes we think were made in the past, trying to learn the lessons from that, and of course we should go on doing that. But I think right now, where we are today, what people are interested in is protection, security, stability, and they want to see people working together to achieve that.
So you do have
I do
full
have,
confidence?
of course I have concerns about what's happened in the past, you know, and we've made that very clear about what's happened over 10 years, the fact we haven't done enough to call time on debt, the level of government debt. Everybody knows we have those concerns, but I think for today, what matters is the stability, security, protection that people want to see.
But in this question of confidence, this country has a leader, it's not you. At this time, are you willing to be led by him?
Well, we have a Prime Minister. We have a Prime Minister who's running the country, and at a difficult time, I think it's right for opposition parties to try and work together with the government. That's what I've said.
Yesterday, George Osborne lambasted Gordon Brown, never trust a Labour government with public finances. That's not the language that you're speaking today.
Well, I completely agree with George, and I have made that point as well. I mean, there are, you know, there's no point denying things we've said in the past, and they are all, I think, true.
It wasn't just the past, it was yesterday. Never trust a Labour government with public finances. Isn't that the kind of language that panics people?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that's a perfectly legitimate point to make. But obviously, with what happened in Congress and the fact that that package didn't pass, and the uncertainty in the markets and the instability in financial markets, I think it is important that we say it to the government. Look, they know we think they've made mistakes. They know that we don't agree with what has been done. But in terms of the things that need to be done now, the financial regulation that needs to be passed, the deposit protection that is necessary, you know, they can count on the fact that the opposition will behave in a responsible way. I mean, of course, this is a balance, but I think it's the right balance to strike.
Let's look at some of those issues, because what people really want to know right now is, are their savings safe? Are their pensions safe? Should we be following the Irish example and guaranteeing bank deposits?
Well, we have to wait and see exactly what the Irish do, and I think it wouldn't be sensible to speculate with you on the precise nature of the steps that may need to be taken if the turbulence continues. I'm sorry, that's a boring thing to say in an interview, but I actually happen to think it's important. I think if even opposition politicians start playing a game of sort of endless speculation about the next steps, I don't think that's helpful, so I'm just not going to do it, I'm afraid.
But you might not speculate, but if people know that their bank deposits are guaranteed in Ireland, what happens if everyone changes to an Irish bank account?
Well, I think what everybody knows in Britain is that there is deposit protection, that is protected. We want the legislation to be updated. We think that it should go further. But I think people know there is a scheme at the moment, and the money is safe.
This is a game changer, isn't it? Up till now, that the right has had a message. You've gained ground with that message that big government doesn't work, that the markets can sort everything out. And now the left is screaming at you. That just simply isn't true.
I don't think that's right. I mean, as I have said, I think there are always in a situation like this, there are dangers for the right and dangers for the left. The danger for the left is that if this is used as an excuse to terminally bash free market economics and market systems, I think that would be a mistake. Because market-based economics has been very successful for our country and for our world. The danger for the right, I completely accept your point. There is a danger of pretending that regulation isn't important. It is important.
That old flavour, if you like, is unfashionable now. It's not just your party in danger of looking irrelevant right now. It's the whole message of the right. This must make you uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable territory, isn't it?
No, I don't think so at all. Markets need rules. I believe in social responsibility. I believe we all have responsibilities, including business. So I don't feel on the wrong side of this argument or that history is going in a different way at all. This is, yes, it is a crisis for the market system, but I think we've got to try and work out how to regulate the market and save the market, not to bury it. The danger, there's a massive danger for the left here. There's a big danger, which is if they think this is the opportunity we've waited for to tear up coming to terms with market economics and to trash the whole system, that would be a huge mistake. What's stuck in my mind is thinking, when we talk about financial services, we're talking about people working in call centres in Bristol, people working in branches of building societies and banks up and down the country. This is not just sort of some city fat cats, that some of whom have behaved in a stupid and greedy way. There's no doubt about that.
OK, but at a time of national crisis, which you yourself have recognised, you're asking an awful lot of the electorate to seal the deal, your phrase, with a man who's got so little economic experience. That line, novice, used by Gordon Brown last week, that must have hurt, didn't it?
No, I mean, look, this is not the day for, personal politics and all of that. But I mean, what I would say is, look, I've worked in business, I've worked in the Treasury, I've worked in politics, I've run the Conservative Party for 3 years. I think people can see I have put together a strong and united team. I've got the Conservative Party back in the centre ground of politics. I think people can see a record of judgment and of good decisions. And of course, at the next election, we can play all these things out. And I'm very happy to. I don't think today is the day to do all of that.
But tomorrow might be. Today you're offering unity. Today you're talking about bipartisanship. Tomorrow, don't you have to seal the deal with the electorate? That's what you have to go out and do.
Tomorrow what I have to do is set out what the Conservative Party can offer, the unity that I think we bring, because we are an extraordinarily unified party, the plans for change that we have, and to talk about those issues, and that's what I do. Obviously, I'm having to make some, with the circumstances taking place, quite a lot of changes to my speech, but
you
when we
can't
finish
do
this
both
interview,
honestly, really, can you?
Well, we'll have to wait and see.
David Cameron, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm joined now by the Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesman Vince Cable and the Labour MP John McFall, who's chair of the Treasury Select Committee. Mr McFall, first off, can we be absolutely confident about the security of British banks, given what we've seen with the yo-yoing of their share price of some of them?
Well, this is a financial storm, Jeremy, and I think as this storm rages, the only thing we can be sure of is it will be governments that can save us, not the financial services industry itself, which is in chaos today. So the issue for government is to ensure that it stands full square behind banks and has an adequate depositor protection scheme, which the government are going to legislate for in the banking reform bill that comes before Parliament when we go back in a few weeks' time.
Vince Cable, do you think this upping of the guarantee to 50,000 is enough, or should you do what the Irish government's done?
Well, it's helpful, but I mean, it's a small difference. I mean, the point about the Irish initiative is it is very particular to Ireland. They've got some very wobbly banks. But essentially what they're doing is making explicit what's implicit here, and has already been accepted in relation to Bradford and Bingley, that actually the limit is much higher. If you're imagining, for example, somebody buying a house, selling a house, there's a large amount of money on short-term deposit. People need to know that is protected.
And they don't know that, whereas if you put it into, I don't know, Allied Irish Bank or something, or maybe even Northern Rock, you probably would be safe with it.
Well, that's why we're saying, at the moment, I don't think there is any worry about the banks, and people have no reason to be worried about it in terms of their deposit, but let's be absolutely upfront and explicit and say that their deposits are protected.
Now, this question of a bipartisan, or I suppose you would say tripartisan policy, because you also support the government, how significant a moment is it?
I think it is important. I mean, the key factor, I think, was what happened in the United States. You know, people lapsed into tribal warfare, and the consequences were absolutely catastrophic, and we can't allow that to happen here. But yeah, there will be continuing arguments about who is to blame for how we got here. There will be continuing differences about what we do next and the medium-term reforms to regulation and so on. But as of this moment, in a panic environment, it is important we all sing from the same song sheet.
John McFall, how significant do you think it is?
I think it's hugely significant, Jeremy. And just before we went up in July, the Treasury Committee came out with a banking reform proposal for the government, a blueprint for the government's legislation. And we had a unanimous report, so all parties signed up to that report. So it's there for the government to take up when they go back. But Jeremy, on the issue of deposit protection, the issue of 35,000 or 50,000, that is important. But the most important aspect is to ensure speed of payout. And that has to be 7 days. At the moment, the banks are resiling in that, in saying that it's prohibitively costly, and we need to have that 7 days in, and that is a really, really important part of the measures which the government should tackle, as well as the £35,000 or £50,000 limit.
OK, but let's continue with this question of the bipartisan, tripartisan, call it what you will, approach on this. In a way, couldn't you make a case for saying that what we saw in the United States was at least properly democratic, that people who voted against the bailout package were doing so, as far as we could see, because their constituents were telling them to do so? That's more healthy, isn't it?
Well, Jeremy, if you look at the vote in Congress, you'll see that those who voted against the bailout had the marginal constituencies. Those with the safe seats voted for it. And it's because within 40 days there's going to be elections there. But in Parliament itself, we have this bill before us for second reading as soon as we go back, and we have a committee stage. And the committee stage is hugely important. And can I say to you that the Treasury Committee report that's put this forward has got some differences with the government, and I think there are important differences it has with the government in financial stability, and I want members of all parties, Vince and his colleagues, to take up the points that we made in the Treasury Committee report so that the government gets this legislation better and more fit for purpose.
Of course, that would mean, Vince Cable, that Gordon Brown had your sensitive parts in the palm of his hand, wouldn't it?
Well, we shall give constructive criticism to this legislation. But I mean, actually, as it happens, over the last couple of weeks, although I've been highly critical of what they've done over the last few years, what they did in relation to HBOS and Lloyds and more recently Bradford and Bingley was right. So it was support offered on merits, not to suppress debate.
But this changes the nature of politics, doesn't it? Once you have people saying, well, we'd all better rally around the Prime Minister and we'd all better agree on the same policy, or whatever the cliche was, you sing from the same
yes,
hymn
we
sheet.
don't automatically agree to the policy if they came up with an American-style package which involved transferring all the risk to the taxpayer and letting the private banks continue as they were, an American-style bailout. There would be a vigorous debate. Some of us would be very critical of it. But our whole approach to this is to recognise that the government is going to have to take some tough decisions, and we give them the benefit of the doubt.
Can I ask you both very briefly, is this some seminal moment at which the whole, to use another cliche, there's some sort of seismic change going on? Or is this something that is going to settle down without too many casualties or too severe casualties?
No, I mean, we're not going into an era of sweetness and light in British politics. It's not like that.
But
I mean,
equally, are we going into another
we're going to have to get around this immediate crisis and give support where necessary. But coming out of this, the British economy is going to be in deep trouble within 6 months, in the real economy, not the finance world. Unemployment, repossessions, and debate is going to be very acrimonious.
And John McFall, you're as gloomy as that, are you?
Well, I think the financial paradigm will change in the future. I think there has to be a day of reckoning here, Jeremy. But for the moment, since it's only government that can solve the problem, then it's important that all politicians work together, because the choice is constructive engagement or Armageddon. And I know what I want.
Thank you both very much indeed. We're in the eye of the storm, was the way one trader on Wall Street put it today. As anyone who's ever been in a hurricane will tell you, when it suddenly falls calm, the last thing you should do is to wander outside thinking the storm's over. The president, who looked so concussed last night, came out and pleaded with America. There'll be painful and lasting damage if legislators don't change their minds and agree some sort of bailout plan, he said. The traders who've made this crisis seem to believe there will be some sort of bailout. Richard Watson has been watching that arena.
On this man's shoulders rests America's $700 billion bank bailout plan. US Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson suffered a crushing defeat yesterday when Congress threw out the bill, but he was quick to announce a comeback.
I'm very disappointed in today's vote. I'm going to be continuing to consult with congressional leaders to find the way forward to get something done as soon as possible. We need to get something done.
The morning after the defeat, and once again the president was making another public address, urging the people and their representatives to back the deal.
We're facing a choice between action and the real prospect of economic hardship for millions of Americans, for the financial security of every American. Congress must act.
Both Republicans and Democrats voted against the bill yesterday, and both sides blamed each other for its defeat.
What you've seen is here by the Democrats who control our House and Senate is they've really politicized this argument, almost poisoned the well to blame the Republicans on a defeat they knew they could have avoided by switching 13 more votes out of 90 of the Democrats to make a deal.
Somebody hurt my feelings, so I will punish the country. I mean, that's hardly plausible.
So why did a plan to solve the gravest economic crisis since the 1930s get torpedoed in this way? Well, it's the timing, of course. We're just 5 weeks away from the US elections. So many political careers are hanging in the balance. Across America, there's widespread contempt for spending billions of tax dollars to bail out the banks, like here in Missouri, where in 2 days' time the vice presidential candidates will slug it out live on television.
I do not believe that we should reward the CEOs. They get paid plenty well enough, and I don't think they deserve any more compensation than they get already.
My bailout plan, there's 350 million people in America. Let's give every one of them $1 million, and that would stimulate the economy better than what they're talking about doing.
This is a lame duck presidency. They know that it's only a matter of days and there'll be a new president. And the Republicans, quite frankly, understand that if they want to remain in government, they have to do what their constituents want. And there's been a ton of phone calls, unusually high number of phone calls coming in to congressional offices against this bill by the public.
Consequently, the two presidential candidates know they're treading on thin ice.
If I am president, I will review the entire plan on the day I take office to make sure that it is working to save our economy and that you get your money back.
Addressing the credit crisis is of vital importance to families, small businesses, and every working American who must be assured that their assets are safe and protected.
So what's needed for Henry Paulson to push his package through Congress?
What can he give the Republicans? Well, I think the only thing he can do is to change the plan to make it clear, and I think he can do that the taxpayers will be fully and entirely reimbursed for any losses out of the future profits of the financial sector that they help. And I think that will be a very good and sensible change.
But this would still require huge state intervention.
Well, that's the most difficult thing to sell to Republicans, and certainly for those who believe in absolute free markets, no, it's not sellable at all. But I do think it's a different era, unfortunately in many ways. But this is such a monstrously big financial crisis.
Public opinion is still divided, though some believe change is in the air and a bill will be passed.
The most recent research, which was done in the last 24 hours, suggests that people are starting to come around to the reality, especially after yesterday, that this is a serious crisis, and if we don't stop it, it's a tsunami that's going to take over not only every facet of the American economy, but we see it's hurting Europe and your country as well.
Well, joining us now from Nashville, Tennessee is Republican Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, who is one of the 228 representatives who opposed the bailout yesterday. Let's first of all get your assessment of the problem. Did you not believe your president when he said this is a disaster which imminently could affect virtually every family in the land?
We know that this is an issue that has to be resolved. I think that there is agreement on that the issue does have to be addressed. Where there is a disagreement is how we go about doing that. And Secretary Paulson presented his plan. In his plan, basically what he did was to make the taxpayer, the American taxpayer, the resource of first resort to address this. And the taxpayer said, no, 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 no. What you need to do is make certain that the private sector is helping to solve this problem. Exhaust every possibility that is there, and then come to the taxpayer as the last resort. So yesterday you saw one version of the bill go to the floor. That was defeated. We have continued to work since that vote. We are working even today. And then on Thursday, after Rosh Hashanah has completed and everyone has traveled back to D.C., we are going to once again be called into order at noon, and we'll continue to move forward on this bill.
And when you saw that your decision and that of your friends and colleagues resulted in the biggest fall on the stock market in recorded history, what did you think?
We know that this is an issue that that has to be dealt with. Everyone realizes that. What we know is that there are better ways to go about it. And certainly yesterday we saw that play out. Today, of course, the stock market closed up about 500 points. And so we are fully aware of what has transpired. We're also fully aware that the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Commission, one of the things that we have pushed for them to do is to increase the insurance for bank depositors. That hasn't been increased in 28 years, and to move that from $100,000 to either $200,000 or $250,000. They are moving forward on that. That makes a stability statement, and that is right. There are also some accounting rules.
I just want to ask you as a point of principle before we get into too much detail. If you don't get those changes that you want, for example, on bank deposit insurance, you are prepared to vote against this again?
We are going to continue working on it to find something that is workable. You know, there are other changes. There are tax changes that could be made, capital gains tax changes. We could even have the federal government cut some of their spending. That is a proposal that is on the table. There are plenty of things there that we can do other than go to the taxpayer first.
Congresswoman, thank you very much indeed. Now coming up on the program. Does the economic crisis signal what's once called the American century? Before that, though, a roundup of today's news. Our main story tonight. Here, ministers have come under pressure to follow the example of the Irish government, which has promised to provide 100% protection for all deposits in Ireland's leading banks. Gordon Brown says deposits up to £50,000 will be guaranteed here, compared with the current limit of £35,000. A group of retired Gurkhas who were refused permission to settle in Britain have won the right to have their cases reviewed. Amid jubilant scenes outside the High Court, the prominent supporter, the actress Joanna Lumley, said this was a chance to right a great wrong. Current immigration rules say that Gurkhas who retired from the British Army before 1997 don't have an automatic right to stay. The test case could pave the way for 2,000 former Gurkhas to remain here. Lehman Brothers' European division is to shed 750 jobs with immediate effect. Administrators PricewaterhouseCoopers said that it had exhausted all avenues in efforts to save the post, but in the end couldn't find a buyer. The majority of the cuts will be made in London. Lehman Brothers, the fourth largest investment bank in America, filed for bankruptcy protection earlier this month. The markets rebounded today on the hope of the US bailout legislation passing Congress later this week. The FTSE 100 share index was up 84 at 4902. In New York, the Dow Jones was up 485 points. A short time ago, the pound was up against the euro, but it was down against the dollar. There is no doubt, there hasn't been any doubt for a good while now, that this crisis, meltdown, nightmare, call it what you will, is the worst convulsion to shake Western capitalism for generations. For once, that tired cliché about things never being the same again seems fully justified. This has, of course, famously been what the publisher Henry Luce called the American century, as he urged his countrymen to become missionaries for the free market and democracy. The self-inflicted chaos on Wall Street isn't exactly a great endorsement, and nor is a taxpayer bailout much of an advertisement for the market red in tooth and claw. Paul Mason has these thoughts.
There's been a bonfire of the vanities since the Wall Street meltdown. Major names in banking gone, a whole ideology up in smoke. But was this the start of a wider American decline? At the start of this decade, it seemed America had unchallenged military power, the economic dynamism to pay for it, and a credible story to tell the world about free market capitalism. But now, the world has changed. The crisis is now impacting directly on the key sources of America's economic power in the world, its borrowing power and its currency. Under President Bush, the USA has moved from a budget surplus to a $438 billion deficit this year. It'll have to borrow another $1 trillion just to pay for the bailouts underway. But when you look at what the money has been spent on, you realise how its ability to go on borrowing underpins its place in the world. US military spending has doubled. Throughout the American century, those in power have insisted that economic freedom is the precondition for political freedom. But with the rise of Russia and China, you have essentially capitalist powers where democracy is in retreat. And now, in its heartland, the market goes cap in hand to the state. America will, of course, survive in the multipolar world, but its ideology has taken a knock. Put brutally, here's the problem. Who holds much of America's debt? China. Who gently told them to bail out Freddie and Fannie or face a run on the dollar? China. And who's been trying to buy huge chunks of American companies in the teeth of political opposition? Again, among others, China. Globalization dawned less than 20 years ago. For much of that time, America has been the unchallenged hyperpower, its ideas dominant, its dollar resilient. Maybe this crisis is on a scale parallel to 1929, but for the scale of the strategic challenge, we may have to look at another year. It was Warren Buffett who mentioned Pearl Harbor, and he might not be far wrong.
So with the bailout and the deepening financial crisis, is this the end of the American century? Is US economic dominance over? And are we on the verge of a new economic order? Joining me to discuss this are Gillian Tett from the Financial Times. We're joined from Birmingham by the economist Erwin Stelzer and from Copenhagen by the Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz. Gillian Tett, is it the beginning of the end for the American century?
Well, I don't know whether you can say it's the beginning of the end for the entire American century, but what we are certainly at is a fascinating watershed moment in that for the last 15 years, the American vision of how to run banks, how to do finance, has really been held up as the benchmark against which other countries were measuring themselves. And that moral authority, that vision, has now been exposed very much as wanting.
Joe Stiglitz, do you think that moral authority has been revealed as a slight sham?
Very much so. I mean, in fact, the problems were already evident. Resentment of American-style capitalism actually began more than a decade ago in the East Asia crisis. The way that was managed resulted in it was another Wall Street bailout, and in that case, they didn't have a vote. They had to take the medicine that was prescribed. Those economies went into recessions and deep depressions, again at the advice, under the influence of the U.S. Treasury and the IMF. And so what you're seeing is a strong resentment that the policies that are being pushed here are so different from the policies pushed there, just opens up the additional charges of hypocrisy.
Oh, and Stelzer, you're still pretty much a believer in markets, aren't you?
Yes.
And do you think this has fatally undermined the case for the American model?
I don't think so. I think what it's done is shown that there are defects in the American model which have to be fixed, We've had that repeatedly through history, and one of the things about capitalism is the resilience of it, the ability to adapt to changes. We now know what some of the weaknesses were, and I suspect they will get fixed.
Of course, no one denies that.
Problems for a long time, though.
Go on, Joseph Stiglitz. Yes, go on.
Well, as I say, this is not the first, this is the most dramatic crisis, but we've had bailouts. We had the S&L bailout 20 years ago. We had the bailout of Mexico, which is a Wall Street bailout, even though it was called Mexico. It was Wall Street's purchase of Mexican bonds, again, a bad investment decision. And then we had the WorldCom, Enron scandals. I mean, I think you're right. Basic market economics is here to stay. It's the deregulation mantra, the notion that unfettered markets by themselves could work. That is the view, this extreme right-wing view that is under attack. And it's also the case that this is also exposed, you might call the new right-wing view, which is corporate welfarism. American corporatism, where you cloak under free market ideology, bailouts, welfare payments to Wall Street, when you say you can't afford help to the poorest Americans. And just to put this in context, the president asked for $700 billion to help Wall Street and vetoed a measure to provide health care for poor American children, health insurance for poor American children costing a few $1 billion a year, saying we couldn't afford it.
Owen Stelzer, you're sitting there shaking your head in a long-suffering kind of way.
Yes, I am, because first of all, this isn't going to cost $700 billion. You can't compare this. All of the examples that Professor Stiglitz, and I really disagree with him with some trepidation, cited, ended up with the taxpayer actually making something of a profit on all of those bailouts. That doesn't mean you justify the bailouts,
bailout.
but you do have to put them in.
Okay, I want to ask you about
some perspective.
Let me ask you about the different models. And Gillian Tett, you come in here.
I was just going to say, I think as far as the eyes of the rest of the world are concerned right now, and as far as many Americans are concerned, the only way that the American leadership can possibly salvage any moral authority now is to show very clearly it is not rewarding, let alone bailing out, the people who were the cheerleaders for this current credit mess.
And what do you make of the fact that we are seeing a different style of capitalism? What do you call it? Authoritarian capitalism of the kind that we see in China and Russia and other
Panic-stricken survival capitalism, I think.
Really? Okay, fine. But these are wholly imperfect democracies, if you can call them democracies at all. You certainly can't call China a democracy. That seems to be advancing at the very point we're going through huge convulsions in the Anglo-Saxon style of capitalism.
Well, the fact that we are seeing the ideological underpinnings of Wall Street's vision of capitalism being seriously undermined at the moment, the fact that is coinciding with the shift in economic power to other areas of the world creates a fascinating nexus right now. And certainly there are some investment bankers talking behind the scenes about the emergence of maybe a new vision of more Asian-style capitalism, of family-run businesses, that type of vision going forward.
Joseph Stiglitz.
Well, what I was going to say is that actually the intellectual underpinnings of the free market style of capitalism that President Bush advocated were actually taken out several decades ago. The notion, Adam Smith's notion that the invisible hand, the pursuit of self-interest, profits would lead as if by an invisible hand to economic efficiency, has been totally discredited by economic theory once one takes into account the realities of markets with imperfect information, incomplete markets, imperfect competition. So we've always understood, or at least for the last quarter century, that markets need an important role for government. What's happened is that, particularly in the last 8 years, that some special interests have taken advantage of the old ideology, this discredited theory, and used it to promote their own special interest. And that's why I think that what is going to emerge is a more balanced, a more nuanced view of the balanced role of the market and the government. And in looking at those balanced views, they'll look at examples from Asia where there is, they may not have democracies, but there is at least an understanding that you need both government and the markets.
Owen Stelzer, do you think we're beginning to see a disjunction between a belief in the capitalist system, the market economy system, and a belief that it necessarily goes hand in hand with democracy?
Well, I never thought they did. I mean, what they've done in China and Russia is to create something of a market economy, but you wouldn't call it a market economy. And they pay a huge price in political freedom. I worry about the attractiveness of that model. I quite agree with Professor Stiglitz that, and I think he just burned down a straw man. I don't know anybody, even the most extreme people in the White House, who talk about the kind of capitalism that Adam Smith talked about. But I don't know anybody who's talking about re-regulating the airlines or the trucking industry or the railroads or the all the industries deregulated. We have a problem in the financial sector. We have to fix it. We have to fix it two ways: with an immediate transfusion, unfortunately, but there's no way out of that, and then with longer-term reforms. But to say that we're looking after a model in which people are clapped into jail if they go to church, I don't think that's a very good idea.
OK, chaps, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Unfortunately, I wish we could talk all night on this. Tomorrow morning's front pages, they all lead with the obvious story. The Financial Times there, the Times, the Guardian, the Daily Telegraph, and the Daily Express, and the Independent goes with another story altogether. Just before we go, a reminder that tomorrow we'll be bringing you the results of Place That Face online. There's still time to vote for who you think has been the greatest and worst post-war Prime Minister. The poll will close at noon tomorrow. Go to bbc.co.uk/Newsnight. That's all from Newsnight tonight. I'll be here again tomorrow when we'll have an interview with the American ambassador in Baghdad. Until then, good night.